All right, good evening and welcome to this meeting of the Norwood Planning Board. My name is Rob Bamber and I serve as chair of the board. The quorum is present and the meeting is therefore called to order. Tonight's proceedings will go as follows. Public hearings will be opened by reading the legal notice into the record. The applicant will have the opportunity to make their presentation to the board. The board members may then ask questions of the applicant. Once the board has concluded its questioning, I will open up the hearing to the public for comment. All members of the public in attendance who wish to ask a question or make a comment must wait to be recognized by the chair before speaking. Once recognized, be prepared to state your name and address for the record and speak loudly for all to hear. All questions and comments must be directed through the chair, and I will call upon board members and or the applicant as needed to respond. The board will then move into a period of deliberation where it will determine whether or not it closes the public hearing and moves to a vote or continues the public hearing to a later date. A few quick reminders before we begin. We request that participants in this evening's meetings remain respectful to attendees, board members, applicants, and staff. Please be concise in your comments and presentations to ensure that sufficient time is available for others to comment and for the board to deliberate. Please turn your phones to silent and refrain from side conversations so that all participants in the meeting can hear. Thank you. Our first agenda item is our annual board reorganization. Do I have any
Nominations.
I have any nominations? Thank you.
This is Mr. Chair, I'd like to nominate some board members for various positions, if possible. Is that, do you want to know? Mr. Chair, I'd like to nominate yourself as clerk, Ernie Pashkarski as vice chair, and Debbie Homewood as chair.
Can I ask you a question on
Oh, sure.
that? I think you're up next, no?
No, it was me, then Rob, and I'm not sure who was before me.
Up for
Joe,
election.
I'm up next year.
For
Yeah.
election?
Yep.
Oh, for
After Deb.
27.
Yeah.
You are up for election.
I'm
But
up
I was
for
just it before Rob, I shouldn't do it again. Right.
No, I know, no, we were trying to get back into order.
Oh.
We're allowing, if you want, I was just throwing that out there. I thought we were getting back in order where.
Yeah,
it was
I
up.
thought we were.
We did, that's why Rob jumped in.
Yeah.
Yep, and then she would follow, and then Brian would follow, because you were just elected 2 years ago, Ernie.
Right, Brian was just chair.
I'm not talking about chair, we're talking about
Oh.
To get back to that, brother. Well, I
Get
guess
back
we'll
to
get
the-
there when we get to it.
the way,
Right.
All right, so, okay.
no, whatever you want to do.
Yeah. But
I
as
just
for-
want to point that out.
No, noted. But as for right now, any concern, I'm sorry, Mr. Chair, to object this conversation. Any concerns about the nominations as they are on the table right now?
Well, it's just the vice chair usually
Oh.
follows the chair,
Gotcha.
and it follows the election cycle. I don't know if that's
Why
what you want.
don't you withdraw?
Withdraw.
Withdraw your motion. Withdraw your motion.
All right, Mr. Chair, I'd like to withdraw.
Let's put us back on track. I understand what
Yeah.
Joe's saying. Put us
All right.
back on with.
Sorry, I think I was getting ahead of
Okay.
myself.
Mr.
So, Mr. Chair,
Chairman-
I will withdraw, and then we'll revisit this.
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion that Deb Homewood is chair, Brian Hatchie is vice chair, and Rob Bamber is clerk.
Second?
And that puts us back on the track.
All right.
I have a motion and a
Second.
second. Any further discussion? All right, seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
All right, congratulations.
No gambling?
Thank you, Rob.
It was an honor. I had fun, I learned a lot. It
Yeah.
was a good time. I
Well
really
done,
appreciate it.
Chair.
Thank you.
Congratulations on your reelection.
Thank you, I
Congratulations.
appreciate that. appreciate that.
That's right, you wanted
A hard-fought battle. Signs were everywhere.
Yep.
All right.
Okay, you ready to start? 1015 Washington Street, Porter Appliance Site Plan Review.
What, do I need this?
Would you like me to show the site plan on the
Doesn't, it
screen?
doesn't matter to me,
Okay.
whatever's easy.
I'll share it on the screen so that people remotely can see what you're.
I have a couple of So anyway, for the record, my name is John Gloss of Gloss Engineering, 46 East Street in East Walpole. And I'm here representing Courier Sales and Service, which is at 1015 Washington Street, obviously in Norwood. And if you don't know where it is, you should, because everybody should buy their appliances there.
Little commercial.
So anyway, if you're going south on Washington Street, right, you go down Subway Hill under the railroad track, and it's that building that's on the, and so there's the building. And what the Couriers would like to do is currently, to access their building, you more than often park on the left side of the building and come up a handicap ramp to the front door of the building. As you can see there is a set of steps that goes out to the sidewalk on Washington Street. But what the Couriers would like to do actually is to have a little bit more of a patio type area on the right side of the building that will be essentially level with the first floor or the floor of the building. And then when you get to the end of the building, the north side of the building, there'll be a handicap ramp down to the parking that exists on the right side of the building. And then there'll be handicap spaces at that location. So it does a couple of good things that Courier actually doesn't have now. And I will say this, I do work for a few, 3 or 4 large companies that own a lot of large buildings. And some of these companies get federal funding. So a big thing is to make sure that all of your parking lots, ramps, sidewalks meet the access,
ADA.
the ADA, right? So, and so I do that, a lot of that. And so the first thing I would tell you is that handicap stuff on the left is, it's a little shaky. We'd be probably doing something with that. But the other part of that is there's a loading dock on the left that's pretty active. So to kind of separate those from one side to the other, I think makes a lot of sense. So we're gonna move that ramp to the right side, to the north side of the building. And at that point, we're gonna make sure that those handicap spaces and the aisles to get to the handicap ramp are all in compliance with the current regulations for handicap access. That's really all of what our plan shows. So I did see earlier 2 recommendations, or one recommendation from the town engineer, one question from the electric light department about providing some additional amenities. But the one from the light department, I think, and it's my fault, and you are gonna get a revised plan, but the pole that you're talking about actually is pretty remote from where all of this stuff is happening. And if I can just present this to the board for a second, you'll see what I'm talking about. It's because, I know it's hard to see.
That one or
Take
that one?
this with me.
The
I
one
know
that's
it's
in the
hard
middle
to
of the
see,
driveway?
but there's a very light line right here. That's the limit of our work. And if you look at the plan, at this photo, you will see that the limit of our work is here. and here's the pole here. The pole's only,
Is outside limit of work?
it's well outside the limit. So just want to point that out, but we will put that put that pole on a revised plan. And then Sarah was kind enough just to share, and I'm not going to take the wind out of her sails, but some of the staff's recommendations for you for conditional approval. And as I mentioned to Sarah, I see no issues with this at all. So it has to do with some landscaping, some drainage, and some other amenities that would be added to the plan, and there's no issue with building coverage. So I guess I can answer any questions that you might have. And I have Eric and Nathan Schulteis here, who will be the contractors.
Okay, so John, where the pole is right in front of, like, right in the middle here, right? Isn't that right about there?
Right, you can even see,
Yep.
Because here's this, which
And
is
they're
a
not-
striping, existing
Right,
striping.
so they're gonna exit.
Should be right up there.
right, see that very light line
Yeah,
right there?
yeah.
That's
That,
so we're even inside that, and here's the pole here, and then here's the curb cut here. We're gonna leave. So that pole is not, the pole's not in the curb cut, and the pole's not within the limit of work. But I will show it on the plan, so you can be comfortable that we just didn't ignore the
so we don't
electric.
have a landscape plan.
No, because we didn't think we needed one, but we're going to give you a landscape plan. At the same time, that we're going to design the landscape plan in accordance with the recommendations of the.
Ira, didn't you have something on this?
Yeah, so in the memo, I made the suggestion that the applicant could provide another location of landscaping on the property, preferably along the sidewalk so the area where they're going to install the ramp is currently a mulched bed, which was for landscaping. So my suggestion was in another location on the parking lot to install a similarly sized landscaped bed so that we're not losing landscaping or adding impervious that's not being treated.
And one other quick question is, so the ramp on the left, where you've got trees in front of the ramp, are you gonna do some along other
We're
ones?
not doing anything. We're not doing
Or
anything.
landscaping on that wall there?
I think that there's, does it show in those pictures? I think that there's like trees on them.
Yeah, there's bushes.
There's shrubs.
Yeah,
On
it's
the
like a
left-hand
little
side.
bit of
On the
juniper.
left-hand side, right. The other side looks different because the wall comes all the way out to the back of sidewalk. So you're gonna have more of kind of like a patio almost before it drops down and then goes around the corner to the parking on the side, on the
Okay.
north side.
Does my board have any questions? Any questions?
Just one, I mean, basically what you're doing is just taking the handicap, you have it on one side, you just want to put it on the other side also. So
Yes.
that's all you do.
Making it safer because we're making it in a place where we're gonna have more control over it because now we're gonna be not completely reconstructing, but sort of repaving that area because for handicap and for the handicap aisles, none of that in any direction can be more than 2%. So this is what, I'm not telling you a story about myself, but this is what we see all the time. We see these huge buildings and they're, seniors, for senior centers, right? And we know that the handicap spaces are like this, or they're like this, boys, you can't do this stuff anymore, we have to we have to follow the regulation, My guys have to do it because they're getting federal money, so there's somebody who comes out and looks at them after we're done. But we want to do that here. And also, it's going to move the handicap stalls away from that loading dock. which is on the south side, the left side of the building that you're looking at. So those are two big goals that this is achieving.
And just a question for Sarah, does this hold them up tonight, not having a landscape plan, or is it something we can work around, or something we have to wait for until in the
I
future?
think that these suggestions could easily be addressed in the condition of approval if the board were so inclined. I don't see any need to delay a decision on it.
That'd be fine.
Brian?
Just, so the game plan here is, are you trying to get the end game here, trying to get the customer parking to go to the right side of the building?
I think they can still go to both sides of
Both
the building.
sides.
We want to move the handicap though to the right side, and probably
Will there
have.
be any, on the left, I know that currently there's a handicap spot right there.
Right.
Are you gonna plan on keeping that?
I think we have to, in a way.
I was gonna
because
say, unless you put signage, you know.
Unless you kind of get rid of the ramp. I can talk to Cory about that, but right now, I think we're just leaving that side.
Leaving it the way it is.
Yeah,
and-
right now, as far as I understood, was if somebody comes into that side of the parking lot and they're handicapped, they'll just probably think there's no handicap spots.
Yeah.
And then they gotta literally go around the building.
Oh,
You
yeah.
know?
Well, you can't go,
So-
can you?
No.
Or you go out on the sidewalk and go, you know.
Yeah, but it's,
Like,
yeah.
but, yeah, so it's.
So you're gonna leave it, and if
Yeah,
there's
well,
somebody
we,
parks
if
there.
it ends up being an issue, we
They
can
can work
do
on
some work to kind of make it understood that there's no handicaps on that side. But they have the ramp on that side.
Yeah,
I'm sure there's people who've gone there for many, many years, and they're not
exactly.
gonna figure
That's
out
it,
what-
almost it.
Right, I'm sorry,
Yes.
thank you. I'm sorry if I missed the description, but is the retaining wall, that little wall, is gonna be just a mirror image of what's on the other side?
Except it's closer to the sidewalk. It's
Okay.
actually out at the back of the sidewalk. On the left side, right, the existing side, the sidewalk comes out from the building, and then it drops down, and then there's a little retaining wall. So on the right side, the retaining wall will be a little bit higher.
And it's just gray concrete, just plain concrete?
No, I think it's a
It'll
block.
be veneered.
Oh, it's gonna be veneered.
It's veneered stone.
Okay, great, thank you.
Chairman?
Yes?
Yeah, I have a few questions. So you're keeping the existing ramp there,
Yes.
you're not gonna touch it, existing condition, understood. So the new one, you're gonna have the handrails or guardrails installed?
On the
new one?
On the new one,
Yes?
On the
That's-
ramp.
yeah, That's the only answer you have to give. You're gonna match the existing, or is it gonna be a new style?
Supposed to match.
We were gonna match the existing.
Except being, it'll just be in
It'll be-
compliance. I'm not sure if the old one's probably is in compliance, but the new one will be, you know, same style, but you have to have the 4 inches in between each and all that stuff.
Right. What about the signage for the handicap, that if someone, you know, where's the ramp and is the signage? You know, is that,
So on the new side, or on the north side, right, the signs go right on the building. So
Right.
we'll add, I know the town engineer asked about that. So it's just a typical handicap sign, and it's just attached right to the
the appropriate height of
building. Right.
60 inches or higher? All right, yeah, that'd be nice if there was more landscaping, but,
So we're gonna add landscaping, and we're also gonna add some additional amenity for stormwater runoff to keep more on site. Right now, there's very little, just sort of runs right out into Washington Street, so.
I'm good.
Are you changing the blacktop at all? Are you just restriping? Are you recoding? Nothing?
Well, they have to, up where the new handicap stalls are gonna be, the grades have to change slightly, like inches, right? We're not talking feet, but because the area right there does not meet the 2%
A little bumpy.
in every direction. So it's gonna be flatter, and then it'll blend in to the rest of the pavement.
So the answer to my question is, you're just seal coating on the top?
No.
Hot top?
Right around the building, so let's say for the first 30 feet from the building where the handicap stalls are, that's gonna be either they're just gonna repave over it, because we actually need to kind of fill it a little bit to make it work, or they'll cut it out and just redo it. But it's not the whole parking lot, it's just the part where the handicap stalls and the handicap aisles.
Okay, well, you know, we all love Poirier, it's great, we've all bought our appliances there. I would love to see it just a little bit spruced up around the landscaping. I'd
can-
love to see the landscaping plan before but I trust that you'll get it to Sarah. Are you giving us any more landscaping or just what you got there?
No, we're gonna give you landscaping along, it's gonna be, it might be more, but it's gonna be better though. Right now, it's just a mulch bed. We're gonna have trees, right, we're gonna have some shrubs, we're gonna make like a rain garden type of,
Yeah, unfortunately, Mr. Poirier, Mike couldn't make it tonight, but I'm sure he'll love to hear everyone's thoughts on everything.
So we'll get the landscape plan, even if we approve, we'll get the landscape plan before we do anything? Yes?
That's up to the board. You can go in either direction. If you feel more comfortable seeing revisions before you approve the plan, you could continue it and ask for those revisions. Alternately, you could be specific about what type of landscaping you would see and condition your approval upon successful, provision of a plan
But
showing.
he's not giving me any percentage of what he's doing. So we've got landscaping in the front, right here, right, John?
yeah,
Is this
at a
landscaping?
minimum, it's going to meet what's being lost,
Okay.
at a minimum. So what we would intend to do is at the back of sidewalk, right along the north side of the building, at the back of sidewalk, we're going to make a planting strip. We're gonna depress it down a little bit, so it's gonna catch all of as much drainage as we can coming off of the parking lot. And we're gonna put appropriate plantings along there, and then we're also gonna add 2 trees. We're not taking down any trees, but we've been asked by the town engineer and by you, Alex, also, to provide two more trees.
And what is this? Isn't this landscaping in the front? What is this little thing here? At least you don't know. You know what that is?
Is that the original plan or is that?
This is, that's planned from a long time ago.
Yeah, that's a big.
But it's gonna be it's gonna be very similar to that. It's gonna be very similar to that. It's going to be at a minimum the same size as what is gonna be lost by the installation of the new ramp and sidewalk.
And you're gonna
But
put
we're
that-
also gonna look at the watershed area going to this. We're gonna try to make it as big as we can so we can grab as much water coming off of that parking lot. And then we're gonna make sure that we're capturing at least an inch. Is that your standard, or is it more than that?
That's the standard.
Okay.
Hadn't recommended to the board that they required that you meet that for the whole parking lot for this.
No, well, some of it's gonna go by, we can't put a rain garden across the curb cut, if you know what I'm saying, but we're gonna make it so that,
Okay, what's the, anybody have a motion? Do we want to have a motion? All right,
I'll make a motion to approve with the conditions that the revised plan shows the pole, the electrical pole, and the landscape plan is given to Sarah Ilex, to the planning department, for their approval before construction.
Second.
all in favor?
The draft condition, just because it's got some.
Or,
Some other conditions.
huh?
I just
You
gotta
wanna
read
add the other
this
conditions?
into the record, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
The revised plan shall be provided showing the replacement of the landscaping island to be removed with a landscaping island of equal larger size located adjacent to the sidewalk. meeting Norwood's landscape requirements in 6.4. Landscaping plan shall include at least 2 trees, native species, at least 2.5 inches in caliber. And then we have our standard conditions. Yeah, other than that, and that's,
Yeah. And like I said, as long as you're doing a landscape island, we can have it so that it's going to capture runoff from that site, right? Not all of it, but just, we're gonna make it, as long as we can to capture as much runoff from that site and have it sort of treated and it goes back into the ground.
that's my motion.
Madam Chair.
Madam Chair, that's my motion.
And I have a second on motion, as,
And any discussion?
I'm ready to vote.
I have a quick discussion. I'd just like to get notified when the landscaping plan comes in, please. Okay? Thank you. Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Thank you.
You know where to find you, Jen.
I have new places to
Somebody
hide.
does.
No.
Thank you.
Maybe bring my Sub-Zero down there and leave it in the parking lot. Okay. Proposed zoning amendment, public hearing, proposed zoning amendment, correction to section 3.1.6, table of use, footnote 13. We're just gonna have a discussion on that, madam? Okay?
So somebody has to read the public hearing notice.
I'm looking for it. I know I saw it. Oh. Hold on. In here someplace. Somebody have the notice?
I have it, I can read it if you want.
We have it down here. We have it here.
In accordance with the requirements of Mass General Law, Chapter 48, Section 5, notice is hereby given that the Town of Norwood Planning Board will hold a public hearing on April 14th, 2025, at 7 p.m. at the Norwood Senior Center, 275 Prospect Street, in the remotely contiguous school building. The purpose of the public hearing is to accept public comments on the draft zoning bylaw amendment to Section 3.1.
Is 3.16 footnote 13.
3.1.6 footnote 13. The proposed amendment would clarify that multifamily residential use is permitted only within the mixed-use overlay districts located within the Boston Providence Highway zoning district. Draft zoning bylaw amendment is on file in the Community Development Department at Town Hall and may be reviewed during normal business hours by emailing comdeb@norwoodmass.gov or viewed on the planning board's webpage located at norwoodmass.gov.
Thank you. Mr. Clerk. Okay. I think we're just discussing this, correct?
So this is a public hearing to prepare for a town meeting. The purpose is to accept and receive comments from the public on this article, and then the board needs to take a vote on what its recommendation to town meeting should be on this.
Okay. Do you want to start? You want me to start? I was going to discuss that this is what we did in 2021, correct?
If you'd like, I can offer a brief summary, that's your call.
Go for it.
Okay. So in 2021, the planning board brought an article to town meeting that would create a new Boston Providence Highway District. At the same time, it also brought articles that created mixed-use overlay districts within this new BPH. One at the Vanderbilt Park and the other MUOD at what we call the Northern Gateway, which is up near the Everett University Ave intersection on Route 1. At the time, much of the planning board's study and research about the impacts of that proposal was focused on multifamily housing, which was a primary concern, I would say, from the members of the public who engaged with the board in its planning process. All of that study and research at the time, which we have to look back on now, points to the fact that the multifamily use was intended to be within the MUODs only and not the Boston Providence Highway generally. It was written in such a way that we now realize that there is open interpretation for that. And so this board voted a few weeks ago to submit this to the selectmen for entry on the May town meeting warrant to add a clarification to the footnote that is referenced in the table of uses for multifamily housing in the Boston Providence Highway District. That would clarify that multifamily housing use would only be permitted in the MUODs. Sorry, just lost it. And that's my summary.
Okay. So, I'd just like to, Ernie was on the board when we did this in 2021.
I think we all were.
We were all on the board, and this was a long involved process. I'm only speaking for myself. I believe that Route 1 is our economic driver for commercial property. We're trying to, with the MUOD, we were trying to stimulate some activity on Route 1 and clean it up, is my recollection. Feel free to jump in if you have a different recollection. This was a issue, right, that got by us. So I remember my intent at the time, and it was years of discussion. Do you agree with that, board? It was years of discussion, that we wanted to stimulate something on Route 1, clean up we couldn't sell potato chips at a gas station and that kind of thing, and maybe get some activity going down on Route 1, but not make it residential, because Route 1 is our commercial driver. So I am under the belief still that the MUOD was what we intended to do mixed using. Not all of Route 1, because it is our economic driver. Anybody else?
I agree with the MUOD that there were several areas, parcels, that were picked out for that. As a matter of fact, one of them was up by how many do we have, 2? And there was another one, there might have been more than 3, but I know that there was another one up around the Rotary, and there was a lot of folks in the neighborhoods near there fought it, and somehow it got pushed and changed. And we know that the only housing that they really wanted were in the MUOD, so that there's no contest there as far as I recall. I don't know if anyone else could say the same.
I believe that's accurate. The intention was just in those 2 overlay districts that were approved.
Ernie?
I agree. I'll make my comments after the public hearing, but I agree that my intention, or the intention of what I believe of this board and of town meeting, was to have some residential on Route 1, but the MUODs were where we settled. At the end of all our discussions, that's where it fell. And it was not to be a blanket up and down Route 1, and I believe town meeting, that was their intention as well.
Okay, I'm going to open it up to the public. Please just state your name and your address, and come on down.
evening, Madam Chair, members of the board. For the record, my name is David Hearn Jr. I'm an attorney with offices at Gelman and Cabral at 30 Walpole Street. I am here this evening representing specifically Cross Point Associates, and with me from that group are John Huber, one of the principals, Kerry McCormick, who's our Director of Development, and Jamie Sweeney, who's a construction manager. I also am authorized to speak in opposition to the proposal on behalf of Michael Asheros, who owns Norwood Cadillac, the site at the corner of Sumner Street where Wendy's and BJ's are located, and also the analog site, which is within the Northern Gateway. Matt McDonald of the Simone Companies, who owns various parcels along Route 1, has authorized me to speak in opposition. Peter Katniss of Central Motors has authorized me to speak in opposition. And David Allen and Sherry Kaplan, who own the Land Rover site at Neponset Street and Route 1, in opposition. So those are several property owners up and down Route 1 who are opposed to this. I do not represent, but I understand that you have received letters from Clay Subaru opposing this, from Quincy and Company, which is, they own the Sumner Street Marketplace, and David Spiegel's attorneys, Connor and Hilliard, Brian Almeida, has submitted a letter expressing opposition. Mr. Spiegel owns various properties up and down Route 1 and in the adjoining area within the Boston Providence Highway District. If I might speak to the recollections I've just heard about town meeting back in 2021. And by the way, some of you may recall, I had been arguing for a rezoning of Route 1 for probably a dozen years before we voted on it, before most of you were on the planning board. We had a hodgepodge of several different districts that had requirements that on face were ridiculous. You could not put retail uses on Route 1 except by getting a special permit in large sections of Route 1. Made no sense. It discouraged people from relocating there if they had to go through that process. And I had a couple of cases where the process was dragged out significantly, trying to get a special permit. Unnecessary. The hodgepodge of districts created confusion, created unequal treatment, and I suggested to the board early on, probably close to more than 15, maybe 20 years ago, that we had to do something with Route 1. And I was delighted that we took this up, and I participated in some of the discussions as somebody who represents stakeholders. But my recollection of the actual hearings, or rather meetings, town meeting, was that most of the opposition, particularly when this was taken up at the February meeting, was that a lot of people, both town meeting members and people who lived in residential areas bordering the proposed BPH district, were concerned about the effect of the rezoning on their properties and claimed that they didn't know about it. There hadn't been enough notice of it. How could we be voting on it? And so the planning board at that time agreed to take the matter back, and the town meeting voted to commit it for further study, and it came back before town meeting in the June 14th, 2021 meeting. Now, at that time, there was some discussion about different aspects of the bylaw. There were proposals to change the draft. Some of the changes that were proposed were correcting typographical errors. Some were maybe clarifications. When the matter was voted on, it was voted on in multiple articles. Article 1 was to create the actual Boston Providence Highway District and amend the zoning map to show that district. That was voted, and I'll come back to that, but that was voted by town meeting. There were 3 other articles that related to it, and they had to do with the mixed-use overlay districts. Article 2 of that town meeting had to do with the Northern Gateway proposal. Article 3 had to do with a proposed mixed-use overlay district at the Rotary at Route 1. This board had proposed it. but wouldn't go forward with it because the selectmen were opposed to it. Whether that is sufficient reason to go forward is a moot point right now. Article 4 was the Vanderbilt Park mixed-use overlay district. I recall, having looked at the materials on this, that there was a proposal for a mixed-use overlay district by the Dean Street area, but that was withdrawn. It was in the early discussions, and there might have been another one elsewhere on Route 1. And there was a separate article, I think it was Article 5, that dealt with wholesale business and storage and open lot storage of motor vehicles, and was an attempt to clean up some of the issues that related to the use of the manufacturing district for open lot storage. It was the only thing available. And finally, one that had to do with the buffer strip along Route 1 to beef that up and required that it always be 20 feet. Those were good ideas. But in the course of the discussion, well, let me say this. This has been proposed as nothing more than a clarification or a correction. I'd submit to you, and I think the people who submitted letters to you, and I hope, by the way, Madam Chair, that those are in the record, the letters that I mentioned earlier from
May I do
Cross
that right
Point.
now? So all three of these letters are in the record?
You should have 4 letters.
We received one after packets went out. One was only received this morning.
From where?
I have Cross Point, Clay, and Connor Hilliard.
Yeah, those were the ones that were
In
submitted.
my
Right,
packet.
Quincy and Company?
That missed the deadline. It did not get to the board members. The packets.
It did miss the deadline to be submitted. It missed the deadline for
It will.
going out in the packets.
Yeah, I didn't receive that. Did anybody, our packets all went out on Thursday, right? So we didn't get them in our packet. We have Cross Point, Clay, and Connor Hilliard.
May I'll submit to you the letter dated April 4th. We were told it was mailed on April 4th. That is on behalf of Sumner Street Marketplace from Quincy and Company. That we have emails saying that was mailed on April 4th. But again, can't always count on the Postal Service. So they are in opposition also, and they own property.
Artie probably knows, but where is Summer Street Marketplace?
Up by Sumner Street, 1415 Providence Highway. So right where the Bertucci's is, that area.
Okay.
That
Wanna read that?
that's your understanding, isn't it? 1415. Yeah. Or is that the Home Depot site?
Well, that's Stop and Shop.
Cross Street, Stop and Shop, Home Depot. Say that 3 times fast. Stop and Shop.
Okay,
And Home Depot, I'm sorry, the other side of Sumner Street.
all right, got it.
Yeah, not Bertucci's, I'm
It's a
sorry.
copy of the other letters.
Hmm?
It's a copy of the other letters.
It is very similar to the other letters, right. Well, they all feel the same, that this is not a good
It's
idea.
verbatim.
If you look at the history of the vote of town meeting in 2021, there was an attempt during the voting to amend the proposed bylaw to remove all residential uses from the Boston Providence Highway District. That motion failed, the motion to amend. So town meeting was not, I would submit, interested in banning residential use from Route 1. They rejected an attempt that was made to ban residential use on Route 1 when that was proposed. That was during the consideration of the matter at the session that we handled it. That was under
Which article?
That was to strike it was first an attempt to take the Telco property out of it. That was out of order. Second motion was to remove section 3.1.5, section A, residential uses, out of the bylaw. That failed. So town meeting was open to us having residential use. The bylaw as passed, originally passed under Article 1, was a bylaw that made no mention of Article 13. Article 13 relates to the mixed-use overlay districts. It does not relate to the district in general. Footnote 12 does relate to the district in general. The setback requirement of 100 feet relating to certain types of uses to preserve the, and it relates to residential uses, if you look at the bylaw. That is part of Article 1, the actual adoption of the Boston Providence Highway District. So Article 13 only relates to the mixed-use overlay districts by describing certain types of housing that would be allowed, certain types of development that includes mixed use or multifamily. But the bylaw itself, and this was confirmed by the zoning enforcement officer, our building commissioner, Gary Pelletier, the bylaw allows multifamily use, mixed use, to include residential, in the anywhere in the Boston Providence Highway District, but subject, as set forth in the table of uses, to a special permit from the planning board. So it's there, it is allowed, and what is proposed now is not simply a clarification or correction. It is a very substantive and major change of the bylaw that is coming in somewhat at the last minute without a whole lot of discussion to remove any possibility of housing or mixed use that involves housing anywhere in Route 1 except within those two narrowly defined mixed-use overlay districts. They benefit from those provisions, but the rest of Route 1 does not benefit from those provisions. Now, one would say, well, you know, we don't want to have, and I've heard this argument for years, I understand it, we don't want to have Route 1 overrun with apartments. In the 4 years since this was voted, you haven't seen it overrun with apartments. People are not knocking down the doors trying to build apartments there, even though it's allowed under the bylaw as it presently stands. But if this very substantive change is to be made, what you're going to do is tie your own hands against possible uses of parcels along Route 1 forever, or at least until somebody figures out a way to amend the bylaw again. This is a relatively new bylaw. This is a proposed substantive change. As Mr. Almeida argues in his memo to you, to make a change like this, which is more than a clarification, more than a correction, is to, on something that's very recently adopted, less than 4 years, and there's no experience to say that it is or is not a problem, is to really rush the issue. It's a solution in search of a problem. It's not the way we should do things. Now, if this is passed, and I urge you to recommend that it not be passed, but if it goes to town meeting and is passed, it will tie your hands. It will remove from your control as a duly elected planning board the opportunity and the authority to allow developments that might be proposed that would involve some form of residential housing through most of Route 1. I don't know why you would want to tie your hands in the guise of responsible management and stewardship of Route 1. I would think you would want to maintain the authority that you have. Keep in mind, nobody can build any residential housing, multifamily or mixed use, on Route 1 without a special permit from this board. So you retain the authority to do that. But if this passes, you give it up. Nobody will have the authority. You tie your hands. And if somebody comes down the road, and we can't predict what will happen down the road. We can't predict whether there'll be a need, whether it'll be a good idea, whether there will be great benefits to the town that might come from a particular mixed-use development. We can't predict that. We can't predict anything, really, in the future. But if we do that, if we vote for this, then we're predicting one thing: you'll never be able to do it, even if somebody comes in with a good development, even if the need is there, even if the commercial uses fall off or change. What happens if the automobile business changes over the years and they no longer operate these big operations that they've had for years? And there's been talk of that, people buying cars in other ways. What happens to those sites? They're going to sit there, and they may not ever get developed. But there might be a need. Somebody might come in, well, I want a mixed use, I want some retail, I want some residential, like they did over at Westwood Station, where they have residential side by side to offices and retail operations. It's a great idea. When you look at the what was suggested by the selectmen, when they wrote their yellow sheets for the town meeting of June 14th, 2021, they commented, mixed-use developments are a popular strategy for smart growth because they provide places for people to live, work, shop, and dine in the same area. This reduces traffic and time people spend commuting and doing errands. They noted that all mixed-use developments will require a special permit issued by the planning board so that all aspects of the development can be closely regulated to minimize traffic and environmental impacts. The special permit hearing process also allows for public engagement and participation for any specific mixed-use development proposed under this bylaw, promoting transparency and opportunities to address residents' concerns. Residents' questions. All we're looking for here is the opportunity, if the right situation comes along, to consider this type of development. We don't want to be foreclosed from that. We don't think the planning board should want to be foreclosed from that flexibility. And the fact of the matter is that this is an idea that I think just doesn't make sense. The fact that nothing has been developed at the Northern Gateway, the fact that nothing has been developed at Vanderbilt Park over the 4 years since this happened, suggests that while there's a recognition that there could be good residential uses on Route 1, it isn't necessarily going to happen in those two narrowly defined areas, particularly Vanderbilt Park. What's there now? A couple of big car dealerships, the properties at River Ridge Drive, the other properties going up Harbor Freight, going up towards the Moore Street or Park Place intersection. Those aren't likely to change in the foreseeable future. But there are other places. And none of the people whose names I've given you, the companies that I'm speaking for tonight, none of them has said, we have an absolute plan to do this. But what they don't want is to have their hands tied. And some will say, well, they bought their properties with the idea that, knowing that it would be limited. Number one, they didn't know that because that's not what the bylaw says. And number two, many of them, when they bought the properties, there were opportunities or possibilities for development. The example that we've heard about is the former Sky Restaurant site, where the zoning board had the right to give a special permit for the development for residential use or mixed use there with the restaurant, which is now closed and has been for years. So people understood that there were places on Route 1 where maybe you could do with a special permit. I don't think it was intended to take that away, and I don't think we intended to ban it. So I'd ask you not to go forward with this, not to recommend this to town meeting. Why tie your hands? Why, you still have authority to say yes or no to any development that might come along, and it might be that a place that would be covered by this as proposed might actually turn out to be a good place to have something like this. Think back to what I just read, what the selectmen were commenting about this being a form of smart growth and a way to help revitalize it.
Question for you, Mr. Hurd.
Yeah.
So before 2021,
Yeah.
what's your interpretation of what people could do along Route 1, Boston Providence Highway?
Highway Business District allowed multifamily housing by special permit from the zoning board.
Since we started that book in,
Hmm?
since when? What year maybe?
What, when did they create
Yes.
that?
Yes.
I don't know, but it's been there probably for years. There wasn't a whole lot of amendment of the zoning bylaw in the time I've been practicing in this town, in terms of what you could do with Route 1. That was the whole problem, with such a hodgepodge.
Right.
In the manufacturing zone, I don't think there was allowance of housing, but general business, highway business, limited business, there were some provisions by special permit. Nobody could do it really as of right, as I recall. I don't have that bylaw with me from way back when. I was looking at it earlier today.
I recall the idea of it was to clean it up so we weren't running into so many issues.
And the issues were, you couldn't put retail on large sections of Route 1. The issues were that
Right.
somebody next door to you had an entirely different set of rules, or you might have a combined
Three-
property that had
three
multiple
different
sets of
zones.
rules that made no sense.
Right.
And the gain for the town was to have uniformity all up and down Route 1, except for the general residence district, which is actually all owned by the town. Those wet areas on either side of Route 1 between Pleasant Street and.
Right, and we were trying to get the neighbors a little away from the commercial, and we were trying to clean it, we were down to like 3 feet in some areas. Oh.
And the changes to buffer zones
Yep.
and to the
And the
location of
frontage.
buildings responded to the concerns of people. I remember particularly, we heard from a lot of people who lived in the area between Dean Street and Ponset Street, whose houses backed up to Route 1.
Yep.
And they were concerned about that. And so the draft was, that came to town meeting, provided particular protections in terms of parking, in terms of landscaping, and in terms of location of buildings. I'm not proposing to change any of that.
Okay.
I'm not proposing to change any of that.
All right.
I'm saying, leave it as it is. It isn't broken, don't try to fix it. And we'd ask you to vote no on it. And I'm asking on behalf of Crosspoint Associates as well as on behalf of the other entities I mentioned.
You have a gentleman standing behind you that wants the mic. He's
going-
dying for the mic.
He's my client, he's gonna get it,
Okay.
I'm sure, but I wanna make sure you
Can I
have
take
those.
the people in the room
Thank you.
before I take the people online?
Yep, you should just, there is one person who has their hand raised. It's up
Okay.
to you.
Sir, would you like to have the mic?
Appreciate it. Thank you, David. Good evening, Madam Chair, Board. Kerry McCormick, Director of Development with Crosspoint Associates. Just wanted to give you some background on the 63 Nahat Street, which is the property that we own and manage. Crosspoint has owned it for several decades. It's actually been sitting now vacant for multiple years. We've been trying to work collaboratively with the town to try to figure out what is the best use for that property. We actually had a call recently back in February with Mr. Collins and Ms. Dixon to try to figure out kind of what would the town like to see there. And one of the items that was brought up was potentially mixed use would be a beneficial use for the town. So we do a lot of retail use that would be able to mix some retail, some office, multifamily, some assisted living and things like that, which would really revitalize that site that's now been sitting vacant for multiple years at this point in time. It's a 200,000 square foot industrial building, 26 acre site, right on Route 1, but not on Route 1. So it's right on the ramp. It's bordering residential neighborhoods. It would be a nice transition kind of into the downtown center to have a nice vibrant economic center. Right now, it's just a big, large vacant building that is basically costing us a lot of money at this point in time. So we had been spending a lot of money on not only maintaining a vacant building and heating a vacant building, but also coming up with concepts and designs that could potentially work here. We actually have access directly off of Route 1 up through Clay site to get off of Route 1 directly into the site. It's not there right now, but we have access into the site that we can come off of Route 1. So relieves a lot of traffic that has to
Is
come
that
down
an
Pond
easement
Street.
or do you own it?
Yes.
It's an easement?
Mhm.
Okay.
Yes, we formerly owned the Clay site, and when we disposed of that asset or that parcel,
Kept it.
kept it access smartly off of Route 1. So it would likely have to get redesigned a little bit, working with Mass DOT. But whatever we do with that site is probably gonna have to go through the decent amount of planning with Mass DOT. Trying to figure out where's the right spot to have the main entrance, maybe potentially have a signal, safety concerns, and we will work through all that with the traffic engineer and Mass Department of Transportation. So we've been spending a lot of money on kind of concepting and figuring out what's the next best use at that location. Times have evolved, times have changed, manufacturing is not
What did it
necessarily.
used to be? What-
Tyco, electronics.
Okay, and how long has it been empty?
I don't have the exact, but I'd say 2 years. I don't know if you have the exact date, but two years.
Okay. The lights are always on, so I'm confused.
Lights are on and it's being heated too.
Yeah, after those pipes are freezing.
Yeah, all right, okay.
So, we'd like to come up with an option that would work for us, work for the community. We thought mixed use, so that's why we, had a meeting set up to talk to the town to discuss what options. We were starting to make plans for a mixed-use center, and that's what it looked like. When I read the zoning regulations, it was very clear that mixed use or multifamily and mixed use was allowed by right with a special permit from the planning board, which would be coming back to you guys, collaborating on the design and work with the community, and that's what we're trying to move forward with. And it's unfortunate, and we actually got determination from the building commissioner that our interpretation of that is correct. Now granted, if it was the intent was to be something different, currently the regulations are written such that multifamily is allowed in the Boston Province Highway by special permit under the planning board approval. So we were going forward under that understanding, and it was unfortunate to hear that. And then it was unfortunate to see this footnote be added in without understanding why it was being put forward. So we were trying to work collaboratively with the town, and unfortunately this doesn't seem to be that case. So we have to go back to the drawing board, and it's hard to understand how many more years it's going to sit vacant or what challenges we have. Times change, industrial uses, maybe under the current administration, maybe we were sitting on a gold mine, but it's hard to say. So having the flexibility, which I think Mr. Ern is trying to explain, is having the ability to have flexibility and work with the town, which we were trying to do, would be beneficial to a landowner that's been contributing multiple thousands and thousands of dollars to the tax base for years.
Appreciate it, thank you. Anyone else in the audience?
Joe Collins, Economic Development Director for the town. Do I need to give my address? No, great. I do have am I allowed to provide a handout?
Actually, that's the chair's. You can ask permission from the
May
chair.
I give you a handout?
I love this.
Thank you.
Pass it down.
So I did it last month, just talk about some economic data related to Route 1 as a major employment center. I'll just reiterate a few things. Norwood is unique in that as a suburb, the workforce does grow by just a little under 4,000 per day, which is quite unusual for a suburb. And that this employment center plays a role, it provides jobs for Norwood residents and those who live outside of the town as well. It creates a multiplier effect for the town, for Norwood as well as surrounding communities. Norwood with the split tax rate does allow us to tax commercial and industrial properties at a higher rate, which allows for residential property owners to live in the town with a much lower tax rate than a lot of area communities. The handout that I provided you is actually two heat maps, one of which shows the major employment centers, which are located primarily along Route 1. You'll also notice one in Norwood Center as well as University Avenue. The second one is a heat map that shows where residents in Norwood tend to live. As you can see, the heat map with the employment centers is lit up quite significantly along Route 1, except for one area north of Pendergrass Circle, which is over to the northeast, which is mostly wetland, nothing that can develop anywhere in that area anyway. But primarily, if you notice in Norwood, basically along Route 1 and University Avenue is where the jobs are located in town. If there's any questions about this or any other information that I provided tonight or last month, I'm happy to answer them.
So the one that's darker, that's in all jobs in home section A. How's it does it? Explain this to me. So we've got a darker one, which is when people are coming into town, and a lighter one. Are we putting that up on the screen? No.
So the one in your left hand, the darker purple is where residents live.
Okay.
One map in your right hand, the darker purple is where individuals tend to work in town.
Okay. Anyone on the board, questions?
It sort of mirrors the idea of keeping business and industry on Route 1 versus residential, if you look at the map existing as it is now. The pattern.
Yeah. Do you want to extrapolate on this, or just give us these handouts?
I'll just give the handouts and reiterate what I mentioned last week, as well as just reiterate the importance of the commercial industrial tax base. that is focused mostly on Route 1 and University Avenue in town.
Any questions?
Just have one.
Yep.
Madam Chair. Thanks, Joe. Is the Economic Development Committee taking a position on this amendment at all?
Yes, they voted 4-1 in favor of the rezoning. They actually added that they would prefer to have fewer housing, which I believe is why the one person, he was in favor of the 2 mixed-use overlay districts.
Okay, thank you.
If you'd like any clarification, I could ask them.
No, that's fine. I just want to know if you took a, that's fine, thank you.
Yes, sir.
I just want to say, when I first got on the board many years ago, we had a lot of issues with people who lived not on Route 1, but backed up to the businesses. And there was a lot of negotiation, a lot of issues. And I believe that's why we do try to keep them separate. As a matter of fact, I think when we zoned, we added fences at certain heights, and when they back up to a neighborhood. And there was a lot of input on that, and they really did want to be apart as much as they can, because a lot of it had already been built, and a lot of the businesses had already been in there. And I just wanted to make that point, and I'm sure that's why when they did this again, that they added those things, and the neighbors along there made their points, and their points were taken, and they were put into the zoning on that to try to protect those neighborhoods. I do want to just say on the Cross Point situation, that was one of the places where they could have been MUOD. It wasn't just the selectmen. I know they had heard from a lot of neighbors. It probably helped them make that decision to knock that one out. I personally like that one for the housing. It's like this gentleman said, it's been vacant for a long time. It backs up right with all this other housing, and it is really just off the ramp. It's not really on Route 1. I can't see businesses doing a lot there. I think that housing probably would have been the best place to put the MUOD. That's just my opinion, but we have what we have. So I just want to make those points.
Anybody else?
There are 2 public comments.
Online? How do I do that? Just say go?
With Brian Almeida and Luke Adams, both on
Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, sure.
Brian Almeida or Luke Adams, both on
How about we do Brian Almeida next? Do you pull him up? You know how to-
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen of the board. Are you able to see me?
No,
Hopefully hear me.
we can hear you. We have a
Not sure why I'm
little sign,
Not visible.
ME or something.
but thank you very much. Here I am. I am now visible. Brian Almeida here on behalf of 1369 Boston Providence Highway Realty Trust, which owns the site which was once Sky Restaurant. I wanted to comment briefly and follow up to my letter just based on some of the things that I've heard this evening. I fully endorse Attorney Hearn and his client's views on this issue. And I also just sort of wanted to point out that my client's parcel, the Sky Restaurant parcel, which has been vacant now for 4 years, is very unique in several respects when it comes to the conversation about this district and the zoning change. In 2019, this property was a split lot where it has a residential component in the rear, and I believe the limited manufacturing district was the other designation. And it immediately backs up onto residential properties. It was before the zoning board in 2019 on one of the very same special permits that David Hearn just referenced for multifamily housing, which was approved unanimously by the zoning board. That decision was then appealed by an abutter to the rear. In compromise of that settlement, the zoning board approved a mixed-use development for this site, which was going to maintain the Sky Restaurant use at the ground floor and have mixed-use development at the higher floor of the building, which was going to be added. Unfortunately, that never came to pass. The then owner of the property decided that was too economically infeasible and sold the parcel to my client in 2021. And since then, it's remained vacant. Part of that justification was to see what would become of the Boston Providence Highway District, and my client relied on the fact that, as currently written, mixed-use development would be allowed within the district. And much like the property that Attorney Hearn's client just referenced, this parcel has now been vacant for 4 years, and amending the zoning in this manner is going to make filling that property even more challenging. So for those reasons, and for the reasons that Hearn and his client ably voiced, and also those other reasons in my letter, my client wishes to urge the board to vote no in its recommendation to town meeting. Thank you.
Mr. Almeida, can I ask you a question?
Yes.
So your current client has owned it since 2021? Did you say?
I believe that's correct. But I think it was early enough in the year that it might have been before the rezoning was passed.
And he got that carried over, the permit that he got to do mixed use, correct?
Correct.
But he's just decided not to do anything with it.
I think that economic realities being what they are, he hadn't yet constructed it, but he hoped to.
Okay.
And this was the use that the zoning board had essentially twice decided was beneficial for this parcel, a residential component, either in full or in part.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Any questions for Mr. Almeida before we move on to Luke? Luke, any? Okay,
Can you hear me?
we can, and see you.
I apologize. I don't have a comment for this issue. I'm on the meeting for the 83 Morse Street
Okay.
application.
That's all. Okay, thank you. Anybody else in the audience? No? Anybody else online? I know. I see him.
She's opposing.
No, I'm not.
Are you
All those
the kid
other
in school
people are
that always
not?
raises his hand all the time?
We're all set with folks online.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I'm going to recognize Mr. Hearn again.
I may borrow this for a minute. Thank you. I appreciate these pictures of graphs that Mr. Collins gave us, but I don't want everybody to think that we're against jobs on Route 1. We're not. Jobs are good for everybody. He's talking about the density of jobs. It doesn't take much to understand that the density of jobs in this town is not in the residential neighborhoods, but along Route 1 in the business district. And we don't propose to do anything about that would hurt that. To Mr. Sheehan's comment about the work that was done and the past troubles that people have had with developments along Route 1, I remember a lot of hearings along the West Border Road neighborhood involving that and the development and expansion of car dealerships along there. Those were concerns for folks. And when this board crafted the bylaw that we're talking about and town meeting voted on it, there were additional protections built in for those who live in neighborhoods that abut the
Such
Route
as?
1 Boston Province Highway District. So
Such
that was
as?
done. But what Mr. Sheehan talked about, the past problems on West Border Road, and that people wanted to separate residential neighborhoods from the Route 1 activity. That's true. But that doesn't mean that some people won't choose to live along, on Route 1 if a multifamily or mixed-use development is developed, is created in the areas we're talking about. The market will determine that.
I agree, and I think I know where you're going with it, and I think I'm, we had it in our book for years, and nothing happened with it, but this was something that we did not anticipate. I don't know how it got so far without.
How we got residential use allowed on Route 1?
Yes.
It was proposed and voted at town meeting. And if you look at the draft of the bylaw, there was no attempt in laying out the uses in 3.1.5, Section A, which is the residential uses. There was no attempt to amend that, except to add footnote 12, which said these uses, in order to preserve the Route 1 corridor, the part of it that faces right on or butts right on the highway, in order to preserve that for commercial uses, any development of this type, mixed use or multifamily, has to be set back 100 feet from Route 1. So we took into account that we're going to do this, it's going to be set back 100 feet because we want to keep that area of the corridor open for
But that's
those
not the
uses
thing.
that, if I may finish, for those uses that depend upon visibility on Route 1. That's right in the bylaw. So it didn't exclude these uses. And everybody's acting as if this was a big mistake or this was a minor correction. And as Mr. Almeida said in his comments, and I have said, you are taking away substantive rights if this is passed. You're taking away something the town meeting actually voted on. Now, some of you say, well, they didn't know what they were voting on. Well, whether they did or didn't, they voted on it. And this passed, I think Article 1 passed unanimously, if I go back to my notes, to adopt this highway district by the Boston Province Highway District. So Mr. Sheehan's comments about past history with problems with the car dealers that abutted residential, I agree with that. I remember those hearings. I wasn't directly involved in them, but I remember that, reading about it all the time. This has nothing to do with that. This has to do with people wanting to perhaps develop residential use and having that taken away from them.
Okay.
And this has nothing to do with that either.
I understand.
Thank you.
Nobody else? Ernie?
Okay, as usual, Attorney Hearn gives a lot of good points, as he always does, and I expect he'll, at town meeting, will give just as good points, and he brings up a lot of good points. But I think I was chair at the time, and when this went through, and bear with me while I go through my notes here. Attorney Hearn had said earlier that town meeting was not against banning all residents on Route 1. In fact, they approved some. And he's absolutely right. They did approve. They were not against banning residential. But what I believe was they were okay with very limited residential. And that was a major point, I believe, at our public hearings, which we had many on, and public engagements and deliberations with the former town planner and our consultants. I forget his name, but our consultant. This was a hot topic of where
It was, and
residential.
we spent a lot of money on
very
the
things.
consultant.
But so my recollection is that town meeting was okay with a very limited amount, and we restricted it to the MUODs for that purpose, that we wanted to have some, but not open it up. He's right, Attorney Hearn again is right, I believe also. This is not just a little substantive change, a small change, but a substantive change. It affects a lot of parcels on Route 1, it does. There's no getting around it. But what I think that when I look back, I think that if we had said to town meeting that we are opening up Route 1, all of it to this, even by special permit, that is not what they intended. And that's only my belief. And town meeting will have the final say in this again. And what I look at is why would we go through all the work that we did as a board, as a committee, as town meeting, to creating the MUODs if we were just going to open it up to Route 1 and why would we even create them? There was no need to. We could have just said, let's just open it all up to Route 1 with special permit. And again, I go back to that is not what I believe the intent was.
Right, but to Mr. Hearn's point?
To my point,
Right.
that why would we have spent hours and hours and hours and hours creating these MUODs, finding the right locations, having public hearings, and finally settling on those two areas, the MUODs, if we were just gonna open it up to all of Route 1. We could have just avoided all that work, all that discussion, and just said, we're gonna open it up to Route 1. Because that's what happened. What happened was, somehow, some way, in the writing of the bylaw, that intention was not carried over to the writing of the bylaw, to the actual wording in the bylaw. So I understand all the business owners, they want to, the property owners, I understand that they want as many options as possible. I totally understand that. But going back to a point you made earlier, that Route 1, the purpose of this was Route 1 was our economic driver. We didn't want to have a lot of residential down there. And you can say, yeah, it's special permit, we all take one parcel, one application on a thing, but once you start on and going down, it opens it up. And I understand totally the Attorney Hearns and all the property owners issue here. I totally understand that. But I go back to the intent of town meeting. If they had known that we were opening this up to all of Route 1, they would have voted it down. And I firmly believe that that was the intent of that. And why would have we gone through all this work to do that and make changes and all of that? So again, town meeting will have the final say, and everyone will be able to bring their case to town meeting. We are not, all we're doing here tonight is making a recommendation to town meeting. We are not the authoritative board on this as we speak, but that's my opinion. I feel I understand the property owner's position on this totally, but I firmly believe that the town meeting would not have and did not want this opened up to all of Route 1. And I think it's not just Cross Point, which, you know, is a big site, possibly, you know, maybe housing works there, maybe it doesn't. It's not just, we're not looking at one parcel, we're looking at a lot of parcels. This affects a lot of parcels, and so we can't just look at one particular parcel, and I understand all the property owners. They want all their options, but I go with the way I honestly feel what the intent of the article was, the intent of the MUOD, and what was meant at town meeting. And again, they'll have their say again. They get a second bite of the apple, as Mr. Bamber used to say.
Okay,
Madam Chair?
you said?
Oh, no, I'm sorry, I don't want to cut you off. I'll be brief. I agree with everything that Ernie just said. I was on this board for pretty short duration by the time this all hit ahead, and it was the first major undertaking that I was involved with in the board. And I was part of subcommittees and a lot of deliberations and all very real memories. I personally felt, I agree with Joe, you said you liked the Cross Point site as a development. I liked the Dean Street intersection, and I remember those were not received well by various governmental entities and by citizens at large. So clearly there wasn't an appetite for the entirety of Route 1 to be open to residential development. I understand the argument that this is not this is a major substantive change to the current bylaws written. Sure, but I believe that the bylaws written is inconsistent to a significant degree from what the intent was of what we arrived at, and I think what town meeting voted on. And I agree with what Ernie said. It's completely illogical to have established these well-thought-out MUODs to then have the entirety of Route 1 from the southern to northern borders eligible for multifamily development. Of course, Attorney Hearn brings up some incredibly salient points, and among them are there's a changing complexion of the brick and mortar retail and auto dealerships and whatever else is on Route 1 currently. In decades to come, that might change. Well, I believe that can be dealt with in the future with subsequent zoning amendments as need be. But Ernie said it succinctly. I think that what at least two of us are saying is, I believe that the intent of the board and the intent of town meeting was to not have the entire length of Route 1 available, eligible for residential development, And I agree with putting this matter before town meeting to let that be clarified.
Okay,
Thank you.
everybody good? We're gonna close the public hearing?
I'll make a motion to close the public hearing, if there's no one else.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, public hearing is closed.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Madam
Okay.
Chair, are we gonna take a vote on a recommendation at town meeting?
Yeah,
At this meeting? We have to at this meeting, right?
That's right. We
This
have
is
to
our
take a
choice.
vote
This
to
is our
put it-
choice. We have to do it tonight.
to put it on, in front of town meeting.
No, it's
Oh,
going in
but-
front of town meeting.
To whether we're-
We have to give a report and a recommendation.
Okay,
It's going before town meeting. It's not, the selectmen
Right.
decide that.
okay. So, somebody make a motion? Can the chair make a motion?
No.
Okay.
You can pass the baton if someone else, if there's no one, you can pass the chairmanship to someone else if you want to make a motion.
Okay, well,
But if,
I'm waiting
but
for
I'll
you.
make the motion that the planning board sends a favorable recommendation to town meeting on this article.
Second.
any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Unanimous? Okay. Okay, our next item of business is 83 Morris Street, Luke Adams Glass Special Permit Request. Mr. Clerk, you got it?
Thank you.
Thank you. Section 9.8.3, restaurant with indoor-outdoor dining area.
Notice is hereby given that the planning board of the town of Norwood will hold a public hearing on April 14, 2025 at 7 p.m. on the request of Luke Adams with respect to property located at 83 North Street, Building 2, Norwood, Mass. 02062, map 10, block 4G, lot 32, in the manufacturing and Norwood Space Center mixed-use overlay district zoning district. The hearing will be held at the Norwood Senior Center, 275 Prospect Street, Norwood, Mass. 02062. It will also be available for remote participation via Google Meet. This application requests a special permit pursuant to zoning bylaw section 9.8.3 to allow a restaurant with both indoor and outdoor dining services. Any zoning relief that may be required in adherence to the Norwood zoning bylaw shall be considered by the board. Interested persons are encouraged to attend the hearing and make their views known to the board. Plans are on file with this application in the office of the planning board and may be requested by emailing comdev@norwoodmass.gov, Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. to 4 p.m.
You're gonna be needing glasses here next year?
I'm gonna be needing a lot of things.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. Okay, the applicant is on Zoom?
Google Meet.
Yes.
Google Meet, sorry. You're on Google Meet. Good evening and welcome. The floor is yours.
Thank you for having me here at the meeting. I'm looking to just expand our outdoor seating, very similar to what's next door at the brewery on the front facing side of the building where, along the Moore Street side. I believe all of you guys have copies of the plan drawings there, and I think it's pretty clear where the seating is in relation to the building and the street.
Yes.
Thank you for the colors. That really helps me. Board members, any questions? Oh, we are putting it back here. Oh, we're putting it- I was wrong. I thought it was inside here.
No, it's gonna be outside. It's
by Short Street, right? Short and Morris?
Morse. It's very
Morris.
nice.
Oh, right here, not right
The,
here?
the color photo doesn't have the outdoor
Isn't it-
seating
isn't it?
area
Is
on
it the
The
little
site
green?
plan that's
Yes.
given to you, the black and white one, shows the outdoor seating area. The color photo one is just to show you which building inspections are, like a directory.
We did this in the office today, but now I'm confused.
That's the back.
Okay, yeah, our variance.
More streets right here.
See it up here. Where is it on the map?
Oh, this is, okay,
That's
here's,
the corner, yeah.
here's, okay, so it is over here.
This is the burger.
Who's taking all that?
All right. Okay, I'm situated. Thank you.
Sorry, we didn't submit more clear drawing. Yeah.
No, I
No, it's just a little confusing because on the color overall does not show where the outdoor seating is. That's all.
It'll be right along the Moore Street side.
Right. And can you explain to me how we're going to, I see you've got boxes and then between it is gonna be fencing, something? or-
Yeah.
Okay. And how,
If you're familiar with that area at all, there's a series of trees and shrubs out front between the street and the building.
Yep.
So we're looking to not interrupt the existing trees or the plants. There's enough grass between the building and the trees that would give us plenty of seating outside.
isn't there some parking back there also?
There's only parking on either side of the building, not the frontage.
It's not in the back of the building, Debbie.
Yeah.
It's in the city.
That's not what he's saying.
No, that is. How much?
So,
Yeah.
Lex is gonna,
on the color map, the proposed outdoor seating would be along here in between building 2 and this landscaping island on Morse Street.
Yeah. So that whole thing, is this little thing right here?
Yeah. All right, so this is the park
Yeah.
coming in, it's more street, this is the back area.
Yeah. Completely
All
different.
right, so,
Okay.
yes, it's this area.
Okay,
let me see, what's the scale? 1/8 is what? Anybody got rules?
yes, he's got it in there.
Yeah, but it's, that's 11 by 17 size sheet.
Are you ready? Where to go? Are you ready for some questions from the board, Lou?
Yes, please.
Okay, Joe?
How much seating is out front, on the outside?
We're looking for 26 seats outside.
Thank you.
Yeah. Anybody else? Rob?
Just a point of information, I guess, from our packet here, to remind us this is a special permit only for the use, it's not site plan review. So just for the use of an outdoor restaurant.
So we're not in, so we don't have to get in the weeds of landscaping and all of that.
Right.
It's just the use. Is it okay to do it there?
Okay. Anybody else? Brian?
So that means the proposed conditions, well, is the applicant familiar with the conditions that have been proposed?
We did send the memo to Mr. Adams, kind of going through what the staff recommendations were. But just to clarify again, the special permit for the use, the criteria in the bylaw for special permits comes down to, kind of the fundamental question, is this proposed use substantially more detrimental than what's already there? Occupancy, while it's something that is helpful for you to kind of figure out scale, right, that remains within the authority of code enforcement. So the building commissioner, when he issues, his own permits for the outdoor use, he'll be looking at the occupancy figures to make sure there's enough plumbing for the total amounts of seating and all of that good stuff. So when you have a special permit, if you are interested in conditions of approval for a special permit on use, the conditions have to be relative to making sure that the use doesn't create that substantially more detrimental condition, right? There has to be a nexus between the condition and making sure that it's not more detrimental. So landscaping is a good example of a condition that might come up fairly often for special permits on use, because you can say, you know, being able to have screening, you know, minimizes visual intrusion for neighbors or something like that, right? Like, that's an example of a common special permit use condition. So just something to keep in mind for your review.
So location of it is not really an issue.
Yes, it is in general. It is appropriate to ask where it'll be, but you're not necessarily approving a scaled plan. It must be built in exactly that, you know, same spot.
All right.
This is, consider this like a concept plan.
Okay.
I just want to, this being New England, I guess we won't be sitting out too often or too many months. How long, what's going on inside? You enough seating inside? Is this just how long is the season that you think you'll be using those outside?
We would like to be able to have seating outdoors from May through October, when the glass blowing studio itself is exceedingly hot. It would give us an opportunity to be able to have customers sit outside where it's much nicer.
So in that case, you wouldn't necessarily have more people, you'd have more people. People wouldn't want to be inside, they'd want to be outside.
Yeah.
It's too hot. Okay.
That's correct.
Thank you.
Are they allowed to put those little heaters out, those little mushroom heaters, or do they have to ask?
That's something that the building department will look at.
Yes.
I know this isn't the site, we're not dealing with the specifics of site design, right? But is there any, do you have any idea of how close to the curb you'd be going? Or would it be eating the entirety of the green space? Or this is?
There's an embankment of trees there along the frontage of the building. I don't want to interrupt the existing trees. Wouldn't want to be that close to the traffic. I wouldn't want the noise from the traffic to intrude on people who are sitting there.
Okay.
There's plenty of space for us to be able to have eating and this off.
All right, thanks.
Yeah.
As far as the use, and that's all we're discussing,
Yep.
I'm fine with the use of outdoor seating. I like it.
Okay, I do too. And you're comfortable with Jeff Campbell's letter? Anything else?
And David Dupree, managing partner of Space Center, also is in favor of it, so he's been notified of it.
I just like to give them kudos whenever I can because they put up that nice fence that keeps the lights from going in the gentleman's rental property next door. So I don't have any more questions. Is there anybody in the audience? Anybody online? No?
Make a motion to close the public hearing?
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Do I have a motion?
Motion to approve?
Second.
Oh, good. With conditions, all right. Patio should be constructed with impervious pavers. Look at them, see, Mr. Adams, have you seen these?
Yes, I have.
Okay. All shrub tree plantings disturbed as a result of the patio installation will be replaced. Immediately adjacent area an in-kind replacement. Additional lighting installations must comply with section 6.5.1. Before occupancy is issued, the outdoor seating area applicant must provide confirmation to the building commissioner that exhaust vents do not create any hazards for occupants. And barrier must provide 3 feet of clearance around FDC, PIV, and all sides of the fire hydrant, fire apparatus, or repose. And then all standard conditions.
Okay, so the conditions 1 through 11, are we in the
Yeah.
decision?
So those standard conditions, yeah.
Yes? Yes? Everybody good with
Yes,
it? Okay.
yes, that's, yeah, so to approve with those, with that.
That's your motion.
That's
If there's
my
not a
motion.
second, I will second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Done. Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good luck.
Thanks.
Okay, proposed zoning amendment, section 3.1.5.J.2 and section 11, accessory dwelling units, continued from 3/24/25. Okay, this is we didn't close the hearing, so we don't have to read anything, correct? Wow, I got one right, yay. Board, discussion. Anybody?
Well, I'll start it. As I said in our previous meeting, I'm okay with putting the definition in the definition index. I think going back to our first meeting, the state statute is really what right now is the law. So I'm okay with putting the definition in, so we have a definition of an auxiliary dwelling unit. And we had a lot of, not controversy, but a lot of discussion about this all districts topic. And I am okay with, on the use table, mirroring the state statute. Not all districts. So if the state allows it in a certain residential district, I'm fine with that. If it's not, I want an end. I don't want all districts.
The draft of that change was in your packet.
Yeah, it was in the packet, so that's where I'm okay with that. As far as anything else, I don't want to add any, personally, my own personal opinion, I want the state statute to stand on its own and not get too much into the weeds as far as, you know, setbacks and all things that go along with this. I'm okay with just basic information, basically. What the definition is and in what zones it's allowed and what districts it's not allowed. And what, as far as everything else, I want to mirror the state statute. And not put everything, all the wordage and everything else in there at this time. I think it just muddies up the waters, to be honest with you.
Well, I just want to say I agree with that. I'm glad it's not, that we made the differences here in what zoning districts that they're going to be in, and the definition is fine. And also, it's great to have that stuff in there just to let someone know that we have adopted this, and anyone looking through will know it's there. Gives them a heads up.
Yeah, I mean, just Madam Chair, to Joe's point, if someone goes to the use table and they're in an S1 district, they can see that it's allowed. Now they have to go to the state statute, you know, to find out basically more information. But, you know, at least they know it's allowed. If they look under manufacturing, there's an end there. And they say, well, okay, I can't do it. And so that, you know, it's just basic, it's basic. As basic as get information.
Okay.
I agree with Joe and Ernie on that. I could have gone either way with putting it in or not. I'm not sure if there's anything we don't know about that putting it in would allow or at least trigger that we're unaware of, or maybe we're just showing support on the state at that point. I'm not sure if any of that really means anything, but with Joe and Ernie on this one.
I do have, Madam Chair, I do have a question to Sarah, if I may. The definition that's in red, is that the proposed definition?
Yes.
And that comes from?
The statute.
Right out of the statute? Okay, so we're not changing any wording or anything? Fine, thank you.
Anybody else? Okay, I'm gonna read mine. I don't feel the state's clear on what they want from us. And I think adopting any part of it, I'm not comfortable with any of it. Because they're moving the goalposts on us all the time on this. We can't do this, we can do that. I am in favor of no change. I understand that Mr. Pelletier has to issue building permits. it's not clear. The questions that Sarah got sent out and then they got answered aren't clear. I don't think they know they're not definitive on what they want. They can change it as they go. I'm not comfortable with any of it. So I will register to speak at town meeting as a private citizen, not as a select board member.
Did you get promoted?
Or demoted, perhaps?
As a planning board member. Oh, you're so quick, Ernie. So that's all I got to say on that. We
The public hearing.
we have a swear jar, I record. So,
Public hearing still.
public hearing, anybody want to speak on it? Mr. Hearn?
No surprise.
And so Mr. Hearn, he does make some good points.
I didn't hear that, Matt?
You make
He just
some
wants
good
to hear it
points.
again.
Thank you. Well, David Hearn Jr. of 98 Berwick Place, here in Norwood. I'm just speaking as a resident, not on behalf of any client. I told you the last time we were here what my concerns are about this whole idea of ADUs. I'm not against the concept of ADUs, I'm against the concept that there is no regulation and that there's nothing to stop somebody from doing something nasty or stupid or unkind. Buy yourself a shipping container, put it in your side yard, regardless of how it might affect your neighborhood. We can't do anything about that right now. Maybe down the road we can, and I agree, I think we should take no action on this at all, but if we have to take action, the definition that is proposed in red on what you have before you is the same definition as, not in the statute, but in the regulations that were adopted by the Executive Office of Housing and Livable Communities. So that isn't what was passed by the legislature. The legislature authorized the OHLC to make some regulations. So it covers clauses A and B in terms of separate entrance and all that, or through an entry hall or corridor shared with the principal dwelling, and is not larger in gross floor area than 1/2 the gross floor area of the principal dwelling, or 900 square feet, whichever is smaller, period. I guess that's okay to have that definition. Now, the warrant article, the proposed article, as I saw it, was to see if the town will vote to amend section 3.1.5.J.2. That doesn't exist. It's not in the bylaw. Maybe you're creating it. The numbers go from 1 to 3 if you look at the bylaw. There is no .2 in the bylaw. So if that's the case, then why don't we just say to see if the town will vote to amend it by the zoning bylaws by adopting or creating that. But when I looked at my copy of the bylaw, I couldn't find it. Again, I stand on, I think design requirements is something we should look to at some point, and there are, I think, ways, but not any way we're going to figure this out before town meeting. And I argued before, and I think maybe the members are of the same mind now, that the ADUs should only be allowed in districts as required by the Commonwealth, which is districts that allow single-family housing as a matter of right or by special permit. And, the manufacturing zone, that use is forbidden, can't be even allowed by special permit. So why don't we just follow what the state regs and state statutes say? And why even adopt this? Because we're not really doing anything. There may be some value in having something in our table of uses that says you can do it in those residential districts and those business districts where it is allowed as a matter, where single-family use is allowed. And maybe some value in adopting the proposed definition. But frankly, we're not doing anything that isn't already allowed and already required by state law. So why potentially muddy the waters? I would say that. But, is there any significant harm? None that I can see. sometimes we're surprised by, as we discussed earlier tonight, by how what we think we're voting on may turn out to be something different. So I would just not even propose this. Just follow the state law.
So a quick question to both a planner and an attorney, if I may. Let's say that in September, the state codifies some of these specifics more and they changed those rules. Do we have to adopt that also? If we adopt this, and then they've laid down some more, maybe a little more definitive, maybe a little more, then are we in violation if we don't go in front of, if we don't do this dog and pony show again?
So no, I would argue that what we're proposing to do is compliance with the Affordable Homes Act, and that would be a much more challenging thing to change. I'm not saying that the legislature couldn't take that up again, they certainly could. Regulations can be altered more easily, but I don't think we've editorialized anything that kind of ventures into that territory by just doing the definition and these basic single-family residential districts. I do think that there's a risk if we put together a more full-throated ADU bylaw, as it were, right? So if, as a board, we went down the road of saying, you know, let's look at the model, you know, zoning bylaw that the state, you know, put out and start to, you know, personalize it and further restrict and find ways to impose, you know, Norwood-specific requirements on it. I do think there's a risk there, you know, that things may change.
Yeah, I think.
This is brand new
Right, it's
law.
brand new.
There's gonna be challenges to it, I'm certain, in other communities across the Commonwealth. So it does remain to be seen, you know, what will happen in the coming years, but I do think that we're a little bit isolated from that, taking the path that has been proposed, which is really just a definition and the basic uses. We're not really kind of doing a whole lot more than that.
So we've got 5 towns now that are ahead of us that are opposing it. But that's my read on, you know, going on the website, believe it or not. I'm just wondering if something else changes and they drop something else on us, do we then have to start? Do we have to take that, or do we have to?
We
Vote
don't
on
have
it?
a
Do we have-
crystal ball to see what the state might come up with next year.
Okay, okay.
You're reminding,
What?
by putting this in our own local bylaws, we're not some sort of retroactively allowing that to be a path for the state to apply more. You know, that doesn't work that way, right? It doesn't.
Say that again.
So just by having a definition in our local bylaw, it wouldn't sort of be a door for the state to sort of work through or.
If the state, if the legislature did come out with, you know, a new law, right, at some point in the future, whether it's sooner or later, that was somehow in, you know, it was somehow contradictory to this or literally any other part of our bylaw, we would have to go back to the drawing board and make sure that we update it to be in compliance with the state law. And that's true for any provision in the bylaw.
Ready?
Yeah, I think, Debbie, what you're maybe referring to would be, and I don't think this would ever happen, but the scenario that, say there was, you know, new administration came in or whatever, and they looked at this and they wanted to repeal it. And the state repealed this law, then where towns have it on the books, do they have to go back to their town meetings and also repeal it? With the answer to that, I believe, would be yes.
Yes.
Is that what you were getting at? If the
Well,
state
it's
made
not,
it-
but it's a really good point.
But what I'm asking for is just strictly use table. I mean, definition is definition.
I understand what you're
No matter
asking for.
If, whatever, definition. But the use table would just, so if someone, and to Attorney Hearn's point, it has some benefit, and I believe it does have some benefit to put it in the use table, under what districts it's allowed and what districts it's not allowed. So if someone is to look, they don't have to make the call. to the building inspector and say, hey, I got a piece of property on XYZ Street, can I do this? And, I mean, he can, and if he knows what his district is, he knows if it's allowed or not.
Yep.
And it's basically, I believe it has some benefit, but as far as the weeds, gotta go through Gary and go to the state statute.
Okay. I'm gonna give Mr. Hearn.
You want the attorney's answer? You asked.
Sure, can I have the Reader's Digest attorney's answer?
By the way, I misspoke. The definition of the regulations is in the statute, in section 7. Section 8 is where they prohibit zoning bylaws that would forbid this type of use or require discretionary zoning approval. But they don't prohibit site plan review, certain other regulations relating to dimensional setbacks. That's fleshed out a little more in the regulations and is limited. But to your question of whether the state changes anything, do we have to follow it? It's state law, we have to follow it. And the legislature has authorized the creation of regulations by bureaucrats, you know who those folks are, who create these regulations. Now, everybody says the governor did this to us. Of course, the legislature does this to us. That's who votes for it, and the governor just signs the bill.
I think my question is, I understand the state
Yeah.
does it on high. Do we have to vote for it again if it's another piece that goes into this?
We don't have to vote for a period.
Right, but we're gonna vote, they're gonna put this in front of town meeting. Does it have to go in front of town
No,
meeting?
no, it's a state
Okay.
statute, Debbie.
Well, if you're proposing this, it has to go to town meeting.
All we're asking for to go in front of town meeting is allowing to put the definition in the bylaw book, and in my case, I'm in favor of just putting it in the use table. End of discussion.
And also to clarify, the
Yeah.
board already did take a vote to submit this to the warrant.
Right.
So
Now we-
tonight is, right.
We
the-
vote on it.
The public hearing to close and taking a vote on, again, what to recommend to town
It's
meeting.
already on the warrant?
It
Before the
was,
board voted on it?
it was, they voted to
Submitted.
submit it to the warrant. They submitted it to the Board of
Okay,
Selectmen.
yeah.
And now
So-
we have to vote whether we're in favor
What
of
you're
it.
making a recommendation to
Whether
town.
we're making a recommendation or not.
Again,
So
my-
I'm gonna give you a whole 5 minutes.
Oh, yeah, I don't need 5 minutes. My point is, since it does nothing, why vote for it? It does nothing. It doesn't change our requirements under state law. And to Mr. Petrikowski's point a few minutes ago, if in fact the state amended the law and got rid of this, we'd be stuck with it if it were in our bylaw. And it might take a couple of years to get rid of
I
it.
didn't think about that.
So why do something that we're not required to do, that is already covered by state law, that is supreme to, you know, because the zoning act is supreme to our zoning bylaw. There's no need to add this to the bylaw. And if somebody wants to do an ADU, they're gonna call up the building commissioner's office and ask, can I put an ADU in? Yes, here are the requirements as governed by the state law and the state and the regulations enacted under that law.
Okay.
Why do we have to do anything? Why do we have to put it in our bylaw? It's not accomplishing a thing.
Do you want to?
The answer to that is that they will be on notice, it will be in the tables.
They're on notice of the law anyway. Whatever the law is, they're on notice.
Yeah.
They're on
They
notice
have it in our
of
book.
whatever's
They
in
have it in our
chapter
book.
48. So it doesn't accomplish anything, is my view.
Thank you, Mr. Hearn.
And it could, I thought I had 3 more minutes left. And it could backfire down the road if they ever change anything. But
I see the.
you only make
I didn't
recommendations.
get that, Ernie, good point there. If we get a different administration and they want to get rid of it, then we have to get
Yeah,
rid
for all
of
those
it.
instances.
Okay, so we're gonna close it, what?
Those are those instances where things like that get dialed back.
So,
Never got rid of a tax that they didn't, right, put in that they took out. Okay, this is a public hearing that I have to close.
no, just, while it's still open,
Yep.
Madam Chairman, if I just ask the planner something.
You certainly may.
Just so the actual, what town, I want to know, just reemphasize to me exactly what town meeting will be voting on.
So right now.
Well, we're gonna recommend.
What was submitted to the Board of Selectmen is the previous version that had Y in all districts. If it's the will of the board to recommend, you know, that it should be listed as N in, you know, that handful of districts where single-family housing is not permitted by matter of right, you have that revised copy here. So if that's what you wish to recommend, my understanding is that this would be in the form of a floor amendment at town meeting. So your recommendation would be to approve with these changes.
Okay. So we're gonna, yeah, okay, so
If,
town meeting, so we're gonna ask town meeting to vote on section 11 definition, excessive, what's in red, to adopt that into the bylaw. And if we want, I think the board would like to see Ys and Ns on the use table, would be to vote to them in the zoning bylaw 3.1.5.J.2, which would be a new
as written, it says accessory uses to add accessory
dwelling
dwelling.
unit Y in the following districts: S, S1, S2, G, A, GB, CB, and LB, and accessory dwelling in N in the following districts: BPH, O, LM, LMA, M, LSDD, NSD, MUOD, EIEIO. So, okay, so that would be the two things that town meeting would be voting on. Right, would be adding that and adding to see if town will vote to amend,
Section 11.
which will have to be a floor vote
For this, a floor vote for this, right?
to see if town will vote to amend. And if that passes, what they're voting on is the use tables
I'm gonna call our ex,
and the definition. I just want to be clear what everybody's, what we're
right, but I'm
we're
not,
recommending only those two things.
but it's already gone to the warrant, correct?
Correct.
So
We have to make a
this has to
recommendation.
go on as a what?
The changes that would be made are the switch from Y to N for those last handful of districts.
But that has to be done on the floor of town meeting.
Or,
Okay, can I'm gonna recognize the term because it used to be the, NLVO.
Well, and has the warrant closed? Has the selectmen haven't adopted the warrant yet, have they?
I don't think so.
No, I think they're voting tomorrow night.
Tomorrow night?
They're voting tomorrow night on
Are they
on their
having a special meeting
positions.
tomorrow night?
I believe they're voting on their positions.
All right, but has the warrant closed? As of last week, there were some placeholders. So the warrant articles hadn't been drafted on certain things. If the warrant has not closed, you can substitute language, because it's your proposal. You can substitute the language before they vote it. It's frozen once they vote a
Right.
particular warrant. But if it hasn't been, then give them the language that you want. Beyond that, if you're stuck with it, it's not a motion to amend. Because there is no motion until somebody makes a motion.
Right.
We don't vote on articles, we vote on motions that are related to the articles. So the motion that could be made, normally by two members of the planning board, I guess not you this year, would be to, that the bylaw be adopted in the following ways, as you have agreed. So long as it's within the scope of the article, which is to make an amendment dealing with ADUs, a different motion, a motion that is slightly different in language from the warrant article, can be made as the main motion. So you're not presenting it as an amendment. You might say, this is a little different than the warrant reads,
So how do you
but
want?
it's still within the scope.
I think for the purposes of tonight's vote, it would be sufficient to have a motion saying that you would recommend to town meeting approval with
The change.
the changes.
I will, I agree.
And that would be
cover both.
town council and the moderator's position to take and.
But then you're still gonna have a warrant that reads differently from how you're presenting it to town meeting. If the warrant is not closed, why not give them what you're voting on tonight?
Could we do that?
Sure.
If you made
Why
that
not?
motion, I would give them the revised article.
So we don't
first
have to
thing
do
tomorrow
this on the
morning.
floor because I.
Well, it remains to be seen, because
If
we
the
don't have,
warrant's
we
not
don't know.
closed, right, we can put it in. If not, we have to do this.
We can
We
either
won't know
get it
that.
in, or we do it on floor amendment.
Covered either way.
Yeah.
It's less confusing if you present a motion that tracks the warrant. And if your motion is going to be different from what's presently proposed,
Because then it's
But
null and
has
void
not-
if it's
but
different
may-
than what it is on the warrant,
but may
correct?
not have yet closed, then change the warrant article.
If it's not, if it reads different that we get than is on the warrant, that's.
No, you can make a motion, the main motion, David was saying can be different than the motion that was anticipated in the warrant. So you can make the main motion with incorporated changes.
Incorporated the change.
Even if it doesn't make it onto the printed warrant.
But to avoid confusion, if you can change the warrant article now, before the selectmen adopt it, as
We
part
won't
of the
know that
warrant,
until tomorrow.
then avoid
Correct?
that.
And you would be willing to ask them if we could do that?
Okay, ask them, you just give it to them, if they
Okay,
haven't voted.
So, you want to say something before we close the public hearing?
I'm just, well, we have to close the public meeting first, right? So
Yeah.
I was gonna, I'm
Make a
ready for that
motion?
motion. So,
I can't make a
to-
motion.
Motion to
Thank you,
close the
Mr.
public,
Hearn.
public,
Motion to close. Have a second?
Second.
Second. All in favor?
aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Public hearing is closed. Now we're going to vote on if this is going to town meeting.
On whether to recommend it.
Recommend.
Oh, it's already,
That's-
recommend.
Yeah, you gotta remember, with zoning articles, all we do is make recommendations.
Okay.
I will make the motion that the planning board send a favorable recommendation to town meeting with the definitions and the changes. Changing the zoning map, I mean, not the zoning map, the use table as it reflects on the wise and the certain districts.
Okay, that's Ernie's motion.
Second.
I don't know if I explained myself correctly, but I think you know what I mean. We make the changes that we have Ys and Ns, and not just Ys.
Are you gonna ask the planning director to take it, see if she can get it on the?
She said she would.
Okay,
We don't have
alright.
to make that part of the motion, she'll
Okay.
have confidence in
I'm
that.
just trying to, I'm not doing this, all of these things right, so I'm trying to cross my Ts. Okay, second, all in favor?
Second.
Second. So we're voting.
So we're voting for a favorable
We
recommendation.
have a recommendation and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? 1. Okay?
I do not.
Um, And the last one we have is proposed zoning amendment, section 9.1, floodplain overlay district continued from 3/24, so we don't have to read anything, because we're a continued public hearing. I got nothing. You wanna?
Yeah, so the place we left off with this one was that there had been a kind of flurry of last minute changes requested by the manager's office on this one, and the board decided on 3/24 that it would continue the hearing just to allow for time for them to provide all of those changes to us. I've given you the information about what exactly that change was. It was a change to the title name of our environmental conservation planner, to add the phrase "or other designee as directed by the general manager," to be the official floodplain administrator for the town. And then 7 changes that basically just made consistent the
Like
capitalization for floodplain overlay district, like extremely minor. But nevertheless,
Capitalization, like in writing capitalization?
yes.
Correct.
Not
Like is
funding
the
something.
F capital, is the D capital in floodplain overlay district?
So,
Capitalization to me means money or capitalized.
no.
No.
No, this
Okay.
is like grammar stuff. Okay, so I did forward those changes to DCR. They did confirm that they found all of that acceptable. So,
There you go.
Any questions from the board
Was
on the
this- was this
floodplain?
a-
No? Any questions?
I'll make a motion to close the public hearing.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Closed public hearing. Good, Sean, what, you don't have any, you don't?
No, I
You're
find it
just
very
here for the
interesting.
entertainment?
This is a very interesting meeting.
Really?
I appreciate everything you guys do. It's a very difficult job.
I'll make a motion to send favorable recommendation to the town meeting on this article.
Second.
Motion seconded, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Done. Done. Okay, I think that's it. Is that it, Madam Boss? Proposed, oh, Maytown meeting update. That's all we've been talking about.
Yeah, I know, right? I wanted to take the opportunity to provide you guys an update. You may have seen the Board of Selectmen's meeting last week. At a minimum, I hope you read my memo, talking about some of the most recent potential zoning articles that were floated before town meeting, in addition to the ones that you all have been working on for some time. In summary, since we've met last, the manager's office had reached out to me and requested that we begin preparing a new base zoning district for the area around the hospital. There was some question about who would take that up since planning board's process had already closed. I drafted something for the Board of Selectmen to look at. They briefly discussed it last week at their meeting on Tuesday. As of 3 o'clock this afternoon, so after I wrote my memo to you, kind of summarizing where we were at, actually Rob and Debbie and I had a conversation with the manager as we were preparing for our meeting tonight. And how we've left it is that we think it's best not to move forward on that article now. It's an important project, the rebuilding of the hospital. We want to take some time to make sure that any new zoning we write for the hospital is done with the best interests of marketing to a new operator. So I think what we are planning on doing is working over the summer, potentially with some sort of a subcommittee or a study group to revisit the medical services overlay district and rewrite it in such a way that we can bring it potentially to a fall or the spring town meeting, depending on timeline. But just wanted to give you that update, kind of a flurry of do we or don't we that kind of came up since we met last. I wanted to bring you up to speed on where we were at with that one, but as of now, the manager will be recommending to the selectmen that they not proceed with that article at this time.
Very good.
Is there a push to rezone it to a different use?
No, the idea was to, when the medical services overlay district was written, it was done with the hospital operator at that time. And so there's some motivation to kind of go back and double check, is an overlay the best mechanism to permit, the hospital? And are all of the provisions that are currently in that overlay district going to be kind of universally appealing to any operator who comes in for a new hospital? So that would be the motivation, is to create like a hospital zoning district as the base zoning. But those are the kinds of questions that we'll explore and have some time to study a little bit more.
Okay?
Did I miss anything?
Nice meeting, beautiful day. I'd rather be in the yard playing with the dogs, but it's very important. Yeah, it's good meeting.
Okay?
That's all I have.
Motion to adjourn if you need to.
Motion to adjourn?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
What's this about?
Night, night, night.